So we're starting a new chapter on percents and decimals, and today's lesson is really just a review of things you should have learned in 6th grade, so that way you're all set up to continue the work in this chapter, which is more of the application piece. How do we apply it to the real world, and why is it important that I know how to convert quickly between percents, decimals, and fractions? So today's essential question is, how does the decimal point move when you rewrite a percent as a decimal, and then in the reverse when you rewrite a decimal as a percent? So you wrote this down in your notes today and on your reference sheet for the assessment, and that to write percents as decimals, you obviously are going to remove the percent symbol. Then you need to divide by 100, or just move the decimal point 2 places to the left, which is the strategy you're seeing here. So for 23%, and just like all the other examples, when you don't see a decimal in the starting number to move, you just place the decimal at the end once you remove the percent sign, so that way you can move it 2 places to the left. So we looked at these examples. 52%, you move it 2 places to the left. 7%, you move it 2 places to the left. A lot of times people think for like this 7% that the answer is just 0.7, because your brain has been trained to see it as, oh, point something, and you think the first digit has to be a 7. That's not true. The rule is move it 2 to the left. Whatever number you end up with, that's the number that you keep. And the check thing is really just reminding you that these are really comparisons to 100, and so that's what they would look like. And when moving the decimal point, you may need to place 1 or more zeros in the number, which is what you had to do for this one, because you needed to fill that empty space with a 0. And as always, please put a 0 in front of the decimal point. You never see a number written anywhere as just 0.07, because it can lead to misunderstandings or misinterpretations. That 0 takes care of all of those misunderstandings. And you worked on these on your own, and in class, this one was the one that most of you struggled on. Surprisingly, I had a lot of people have 0.107. It can have a 1 in the front. You move it to the left 2 places, wherever it lands, that's the final answer. And you did these two. We didn't struggle at all with these when you got to them. And then the reverse idea, writing decimals as percents. Same process in the sense that you're going to move the decimal point 2 places, but instead of to the left, you're going to move it to the right, and then you need to put that percent symbol back on the end, because now it's a percent. If you just wrote 36, that's not the correct answer, because that value, this number 36%, doesn't really have a value of 36. It has a value of 36 hundredths. And so we talked about these examples, 2 places to the left, and then we chatted about how you never see 47% because when it turns itself back into a whole number by moving the decimal, we just leave it as a whole number without that dot, as you see up here. Same with example C here. You move it twice. Again, you have to fill the empty space with a 0, and it becomes a whole number, 180%. These two examples are examples where the decimal doesn't just disappear. It ends up being between 2 numbers. In this case, the 6 and the 3. In this case, it ends up just before the 9, so 0.9%. You worked on these in class. The most common mistake was on this one. A lot of you wrote it as 5%, even though your work was accurate. Most of you showed me that you moved it twice and that it landed here, but when you wrote your answer, you put the decimal after. So just be careful about the placement of the decimal in your final answer. And you did these as well, and this time most of you were not fooled. You didn't tell me 7.5% or 75%. You took care of that better this time. And then here's kind of one of the reasons we're learning this, is so that way when you see an example like 92 out of 100, you can quickly write it in its 3 formats: a decimal, a percent, and a fraction. So when it says 92 out of 100, they've given you the fraction. You need to simplify it. You told me to divide by 2 and then divide by 2 again to get it to its simplest form. If this were your assessment, you would see a grade of 92% on the top of it. And then to turn a percent to a decimal, 2 places to the left. So that means up here that leaves C out. So the correct answer for this particular question, which is not another way of expressing 92 out of 100, that'd be 17/20. you worked on these on your own. The biggest challenge for most of you was the simplifying piece. When you see two even numbers or two numbers that end in 5 or 0, there's some simplifying to do, so try. Don't just leave it as the original fraction. See what you can do first. And most of you didn't have trouble with this. The biggest challenge was reducing to 17 20ths. I think you can use a calculator. I think a lot of you thought you had to do this in your head. You can use a calculator. And then we talked about, well, what happens when you see a number like this and they say write it as a fraction and as a decimal. A decimal's fine, 2 places to the left. But to write as a fraction, you start with this, but so you can do the simplifying, you need to move the decimal 1 place to the right, 1 place to the right, and now you could simplify 262 over 1,000. They're both even, so start by dividing by 2 and keep going until you can't do any more. Use a calculator. And then we talked about, again, how knowing how to convert helps you compare two things, such as how many more times UV rays are reflected by water than by sea foam. And to compare, you first needed to put them in the same format. A decimal is the best format for comparing and doing operations. And then you divide, and you can use a calculator. You don't have to do long division to see. And so we did this one. And we saw that sand, water was 5-6 times the UV of sand, and then 28 times more UV for water than grass. So that was a quick review of how to convert between percents and decimals.